Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Snakes Are Everything. I'm Melissa Amarillo, Executive Director, and along with Jeff Smith, the co-founder of Advocates for Snake Preservation. For those unfamiliar with ASP, we're a 501c3 charity dedicated to changing how people view and treat snakes. And we do this through storytelling. We like to tell stories about wild snake behavior to counter prevailing myths and make snakes more familiar and less scary. We also provide kind of everyday solutions to human-snake conflicts that sometimes end badly for people and often prove fatal for snakes. And all of our work, those things, and also events like Snakes Are Everything, is made possible by donations, both big and small. Honestly, mostly small. That's kind of the power of our organization, is a lot of people doing what they can to help snakes, and whatever that looks like for each individual. So I'm super excited to introduce today's guest. Hiral is going to tell us all about snakes and some of their awesome evolutionary adaptations. She grew up in Zimbabwe, India, and South Africa, spending a lot of time outdoors, which really inspired a love of nature and I assume also snakes, probably obviously. And she currently serves as the Africa Program Manager at Save the Snakes. And for those of you who haven't heard of Save the Snakes is a lot like ASP, but they tend to focus a little bit more on international work than, ASP kind of focuses on stuff in the United States because that's where we live and work and kind of the area we know best. And so we leave the international questions and issues. Actually, I send a lot of people over to Save the Snakes pretty often. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you. Excited to hear your talk today.
Okay, let me share my talk. And you can see my slide, right?
Yep, looks good.
Okay, so hello everyone, wherever you are listening to from today. Thank you for that lovely introduction, Melissa. And I am super excited to be presenting here, part of the Snakes Are Everything series. And today I've chosen the word evolutionary marvels. And this is something I'm super excited about because it's one of the reasons why I absolutely love snakes. And I'm sure it's another reason why a lot of other people love snakes. And today I'm going to touch a little bit on their biology, but also kind of tying in to what it means in the greater context of snake education. So quick little introduction about myself. I am currently based in South Africa. I'm doing my PhD on the behavioral ecology of venomous snakes and snakebite. I'm going to touch on this a little bit later on in my talk. And like Melissa said, I am the Africa Program Manager for Save the Snakes. So here in South Africa, I currently run a snake education and outreach program. And you can see some of the photos from some of the work that I've done. So for me, growing up, I never really had a fear of snakes. But I think one of the big reasons for this is I grew up as a Hindu, and in the Hindu religion, one of our gods actually has a cobra around its neck. And so because of this, a lot of people in India also consider snakes quite safe. started learning about the science of snakes, and that's what really got me hooked. And one of the big topics was biogeography and how species are distributed around the world, and specifically snakes, because they're such a great model to study biogeographic patterns and the evolutionary adaptations. So snakes are quite amazing because they're probably the only animal that have so much evolutionary significance, both from a biological perspective, but also they've been so significant throughout history in many different societies, especially from the perspective of fear. Now, I'm not going to dive into fear too much. There has already been a talk on fear, so go and check that out. But, you know, from communities where people have worshipped snakes to people that have been, you know, killing snakes and have this completely irrational fear of snakes. Fear itself is such a complex mindset and behavior. And so it's really quite interesting how just one animal group has been able to have such a profound impact on humans. But more on this a little bit later. Today, I will obviously mostly be focusing on biology, some of the really cool examples that I think are amazing. I obviously can't cover everything in this talk, but I'll try to do my best to share some of the reasons why I think snakes are really evolutionary marvels. So we're going to start off with one of my favorite traits in snakes, which is dentition. Now, dentition is quite a broad, you know, topic, and it includes things like fangs. Now, fangs are really just modified teeth used by venomous snakes to inject venom into their prey. For those of you that don't know, all snakes actually have teeth, but not all of them have fangs. Now, this image here is of a Mozambique spitting cobra, one of my favorite species. And like a lot of other spitting snakes, it uses spitting as a means to defend itself. Now, it's actually the spit, the venom actually comes out of its fang. And a lot of these spitting snakes can really spit really far distances. And this has obviously been a trait that's evolved to defend themselves against predators, but also humans. A couple of years ago, a study came out to actually show that spitting evolved in relation to human evolution and our relationship with snakes, which is a lot of what I'm going to be talking about today. So I'm going to be using a lot of examples from Southern Africa and a lot of species that I've been really fortunate to be able to work with. So first up, we have Southern African python. Now, the Southern African python does not have any fangs, so it is non-venomous, but it has a lot of these teeth. And even though it is non-venomous, it can cause quite a nasty bite. And that's because of its hooked teeth. And so these hooked teeth allow the snake to really grip onto its prey while it uses constriction to get a hold of the prey in terms of the rest of the body. And a really interesting thing about the Southern African python, if someone's been bitten by them, is a bank card to kind of slowly get the teeth out of, if it's a person or whatever the case is. Then we also have mambas. Now, mambas, like other elapids, have front fixed fangs, which are used for like quick little injection of prey. Puff adders, on the other hand, are like a lot of other adders and vipers that have these big front hinged fangs. And then we have these backed fang snakes. Now, a lot of our non-venomous snakes in the world have these back fangs. But something like a boomslang has actually evolved to have back fangs that can inject a lot of highly toxic venom. Now, one of the most interesting things about fang structure and dental structure is that, it comes with this evolution of venom. And venom itself is also just so diverse. It differs between different species, and it's largely driven by the different prey that's actually consumed. But one of the most interesting fang types is actually in one of the snakes called the stiletto snake. We get these stiletto snakes in Africa. And what's really fascinating about these the fangs of this snake is that they're actually modified front hinged fangs, and they rotate on the maxilla, so on the upper jaw. And they actually, so the snake is not able to open its mouth wide. So what it does is it actually stabs its prey from the side. Now, these snakes are fossorial, so they live underground, and to maximize their ability to capture prey, they've adapted to use their venom from these fangs and still be able to inject their prey. So they'll move against their prey item, and then they'll stab the prey from the side. Now, this is very fascinating, and of course, one of the unfortunate realities is that we don't have the technology to really be able to follow these snakes underground and really see what they're doing. Otherwise, we would get such an incredible idea on how they're really utilizing this kind of side stabbing ability. So they're also, again, one of my favorite snakes from this evolutionary perspective. A few years ago, I got to do my master's research, my dissertation on the evolution of diet in lamprophid snakes. Now, lamprophids are a large group of African snakes that are quite diverse, most of which are back-fanged and non-venomous, but they also include these stiletto snakes. Now, since I guess 2017, this group has been split up. So I'm not going to go into too much detail on that. And don't worry about the nitty-gritty of the species on this phylogeny. What I really want you to see is just the great diversity in prey that's actually consumed across the different species, and how this is correlated with the fang types that the species have and the dental structure. Now, again, because I was working with so many different species, and I didn't actually have the specimens with me, wasn't able to really dissect the types of teeth that these different species have. A lot of them are also very small. But what this is really indicative of is that there's so much about snakes, especially our smaller snakes, that we really don't know. And we know that a lot of their behaviors are obviously adapted to their environments, and whatever prey items are actually available in those environments. And what's really great about this family of snakes is that they are specialists that prey only on some things like slugs and snails, or centipedes and scorpions. But there's also snakes that have a large diversity of prey items that they consume. And it makes sense to be opportunistic in environments that, you know, are so diverse, especially when it comes to like African environments where snakes are living with a lot of large animals, and so they have to find ways to survive and eat whatever is actually available for them. And similar things have also been shown in other studies, especially when it comes to this correlation between diet and dental structure. This study came out a couple of years ago that focused on venomous snakes, and specifically looking at the slenderness and the sharpness of teeth, these fangs, in correlation to mammalian diet, and then the robustness and bluntness of fangs correlated with prey that have these hard exoskeletons. Now that makes complete sense, because with mammalian prey, you need to be able to quickly envenomate them without worrying about, the prey actually getting away. And when it comes to the bluntness and the robustness, you need, if you had a really sharp tooth, the sharp tooth would probably get very blunt if you were trying to eat something like a crab. So what this has allowed us to really do is dive deeper into these patterns, these dietary patterns of snake. And it's one of the most fascinating things, because a lot of what we currently know is based on field observations from different people. But because these kind of observations also happen randomly, it's not like scientists can, spend a lot of time in the field just chasing around snakes and observing what they're eating. But with the new technology now available, it is something that we can learn a lot more about. And it really allows us to kind of take a deep dive into not just the snake behavior, but kind of how snakes are navigating their environments. Yeah, so it's one of my favorite things about them. Now, closely tied with this is scent. Snakes use scent to detect things around them, but it's also something that they also give off a scent to be recognized by species of their or conspecifics, as well as predators and prey. But some snakes, or one particular snake, for now, has evolved something called chemical crypsis. But what does that mean exactly? Well, in a study done a few years ago, I was lucky enough to play a small role in the experiments that were done to test whether dogs and meerkats could smell puff adders. Now, dogs and meerkats were used because they're particularly good at smelling different animals. Field observations have actually shown that puff adders are very good at camouflaging, and they're very good at hiding. And even scent-oriented predators did not seem to be able to detect them. So the study focused on trying to figure out whether, meerkats and dogs could actually detect puff adders in comparison to other active foraging snakes. And behold, the snakes, the meerkats and the dogs were actually not able to detect puff adders because they are chemically cryptic. And what this shows is that something like a puff adder has just tried to find the best way possible to hide in its environment. How it's actually able to decide that it needs to be chemically cryptic? We don't know. We obviously don't have any insights in the snake brain, and we can't really ask the snake why it's evolved this trait. But it's fascinating nonetheless. It's also, again, one of my favorite kind of traits in an animal. And because I get to work with puff adders, it's quite remarkable to know that, you can walk past it in the bush and not know it's there. So even other animals walking past it don't actually know that it's there. There's lots of different animals that can climb walls. So we know that geckos do, insects do, and even frogs do. But what about snakes? So this is something I'm really excited to show you, because just a few weeks ago, we rescued this spotted bush snake from someone's house. And there you can see there's a smooth-scaled snake climbing a wall. Now, obviously, this snake, well, snakes are actually able to use their ventral scales under their bodies to be able to grip different surfaces. And if this was a smooth wall, snake wouldn't really be able to climb the wall. But because this is a ridged wall, the snake obviously felt that it could climb this wall. And we see this fairly often with the snakes climbing the different walls to try and get into thatch roofs and into people's homes. And one of my favorite things that I love telling people is that instead of being afraid of, the snake climbing into your roof, just admire the fact that it was actually able to climb into your roof. Now, how many other animals are actually able to do that in conjunction with being able to swim in, freshwater and marine environments, as well as be chemically cryptic? It really is quite a remarkable trait. Now, most of you will have already heard from Dr. Emily Taylor, who spoke to you about rattlesnakes and maternal care. But what about other snakes? Well, a few years ago, Professor Graham Alexander here in South Africa showed that Southern African pythons, which are egg-laying snakes, also show maternal care. So here is a video of the snaky mama actually looking after the eggs. And this is the first example of maternal care in an egg-laying species. Because most reptiles, most snakes will lay their eggs and leave the eggs to be. So the mom will also stay with the babies after they've hatched for this with rattlesnakes, and it's so great for people to be able to see that snakes aren't necessarily as scary as you think, and they're really just trying to adapt to the environments in the best way that they can. So we use this for our educational talks quite a lot, because when the kids are able to see this, they instantly change their minds about how they're viewing snakes. And again, this is why learning about snakes from an evolutionary perspective, from a biological perspective, is so important. So let's move on to why I chose to study snake bites for my PhD. One of the big reasons for this was because, you know, a lot of people are being bitten by snakes, but we don't necessarily know how people are being bitten. And in the process, snakes are again getting a really bad reputation. So from a medical perspective, in 2017, the World Health Organization declared snakebite as a neglected tropical disease. And this is because snakebite is affecting millions of people around the world. But snakebite is not a new problem or challenge. It has been around for a really long time. It can only be treated with antivenom. And unfortunately, even a lot of the doctors that work on treating snakebite, they don't necessarily know how to treat snakebite. So, you know, long-standing issue, long-standing problem, but even our doctors are not equipped to deal with it. And a lot of these snake bites happen in rural areas where people are very far away, at least 2 to 3 hours away from any kind of hospital that might even have antivenom. A snake bite is also a social problem, and people are not educated about snakes or snake bite. You know, it's not in the school curriculum. And in fact, even a lot of the doctors will tell us that they've never been taught about snakebite and the realities of it. And when it comes to the biological side of things, we're only now starting to learn a lot more about snake behaviors too. A lot more about the snake venoms, what they're doing in the environments. And in thinking a lot more about what's going on in the world at the moment when it comes to snakebite, it's really evident that we need a lot more of this biological knowledge to feed into the education system. So how is it going to impact the doctors, and how is this information going to be implemented into school curricula so that people are better equipped to deal with snakebite and just become a lot more snake aware? Because in reality, the biggest driving factor behind snakebite is the fear of snakes. So if we're able to use snake biology to mitigate that, we're already kind of halfway when it comes to preventing the problem. And so in South Africa, we've really been able to focus on snake biology as a way to get the public to become a lot more interested in snakes. And it's having quite a valuable and positive impact because we use non-venomous snakes as a way to interact with people. And the moment that a lot of these kids, for example, are able to interact with something that they've, you know, so long feared, or, you know, especially because it's something that their parents told them that they need to be afraid of, they're now able to change their mindsets. And so if we can use snake biology as a way to completely mitigate fear and change people's perspectives, we can actually use snakes as a model to essentially change the way people are even viewing other environmental issues. So I'm going to show you a quick little video that we share with the kids. So one of the biggest reasons why I decided that snake biology needs to be a focus is because most of us that became interested in working with snakes got interested because we learned some interesting facts about snakes. So I'll end off by saying that, if anyone listening today can share just one fact with people, one positive fact about snakes with the people around you, it will have a profound impact. And, sticking to the evolutionary topic, I think we can really make a huge difference from an evolutionary perspective. We have the ability right now to be able to do that. If we start viewing snakes as marvels, snakes as superheroes, we can start changing people's mindsets about how amazing snakes really are. And with that, I will happily answer any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Thank you. That was great. Oh my gosh, that last video is so cute. Was so adorable. All right, so I will give people a second to start. If you have questions, you can put them in the chat, or you're also welcome to, if you would rather just say your question instead of typing it in, do the raise your hand thing, and we'll, you can unmute and put yourself on the camera to do things that way, whichever you would rather. But I have a question first, and since I'm already on camera, like, I get to take precedent. That photo of the spitting cobra is amazing. Is that yours? Did you take that?
Thanks. Yeah, that's one.
Yeah, that's awesome. Is there a story behind that picture? I'm just like, how do you capture that moment? I mean, that must happen so fast.
Yeah. So that was actually taken part of a photographic tour that we actually do. So I'm based here at a snake park in kind of the eastern parts of South Africa. And it's actually quite great to be based at a snake park because, in conjunction with everything else I'm doing, it's great to have a little hub where people can come and visit and see everything that we're doing. And a big part of that is obviously education. And one of the reasons why we try to take, again, a photo like that is to show that, okay, well, snakes are, spitting snakes can spit quite far.
Very cool. Yeah, that's that was amazing. All right. Does anybody else have any questions? Let's see. Oh, Seal wants to know this is a good question. How does cobra spit affect humans? Which I'm guessing could be like a presentation unto itself, but real quick.
So cobra spit, contrary to what you might think, doesn't actually, if this cobra spits or a spitting cobra spits on your body, if you don't have any open wounds, it's not necessarily going to affect you negatively. But it's evolved to affect our eyes. So it's specifically targeting human eyes. So I'm not going to go into too much detail, but there was a study that came out about 2 years ago that showed that spitting snakes have specifically evolved to spit at human eyes. So that's kind of a short way of telling the story. But if you're interested, go and have a look at it. There's a lot of media coverage on the topic, obviously.
Yeah, maybe we'll try to put some links to, I know there were some good pieces about Graham Alexander's work on the rock python stuff, which is like super cool, which you didn't even, the part of that I find the most fascinating is the color change and thermal partitioning that they do with the babies, which I always cover in my parental care talks. Now it's like, it's not just rattlesnakes, actually. And so maybe I'll try to remember to put some links to those things on the page for your talk so people can get some more details if they want. I feel like when I was a kid reading those, like, whatever snake book they had in the library, it said that that venom can blind you if it gets in your eyes. Is that like just a temporary thing, or like actual blind humans?
So I think it can. I don't think there are any cases of that really happening. So the recommendation is that if you're under, so for example, most of us have access to water. Wash your eyes out for at least 20 minutes. If you wash the venom out, you're most likely going to be fine. A lot of people think that they need to go to the hospital. That's not necessarily true. So yeah, I mean, water is the best thing that you can use. A lot of people want to try and use things like urine or milk. Most of us are more likely to have water on hand than anything else. You know, if you have a swimming pool, jump into the swimming pool. If you've got a shower, just go and take a quick shower. Just wash that venom out. I will say one of the things that I do sometimes get paranoid about is just spitting or venom just anywhere else on my body. I just try and just wash my hands, make sure that there's no venom on me, just as a precautionary measure. Sometimes, you rub your hand that has venom on it, and you might rub your eye, and venoms can still get in that way.
Yeah. I think someone attending this right now has a story about that. Cool. That's it's good. I kind of figured that was probably one of those things, like, black mambas can kill an elephant in 8 minutes or whatever. That's greatly exaggerated. Just like most of the stuff in the kids' books about snakes are greatly exaggerated or just false. So Thomas was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about your work with puff adders.
Okay. So I'm actually using a few medically important snakes in South Africa to do a study on just testing out striking and defensive striking behavior in these different snakes. So I won't go into too much detail. I'm almost done with the studies. So, I mean, you might have to wait maybe 6 months to a year to find out the results of that. But I will say that it's really interesting to be able to learn a lot more about why snakes are striking. A lot of it we already know, but also a lot of snakes have their individual personalities, and I think that's often something we forget. Each snake is going to behave differently, which obviously, when it comes to something like snake bite, becomes a lot more difficult to be able to predict. But again, if we're able to really prevent a lot of this fear-based conflict behavior, it reduces the risk in the first place.
Very interesting. Yeah, I think the idea that snakes have individual personalities itself is just like mind-blowing, shocking, and just unbelievable to a lot of people. I know when I have mentioned that when we get questions about snake bite, and I'm like, yeah, I mean, it's what causes a snake bite. It's like this laundry list of things. And I'm like, oh, and then also snakes just they have personalities, they're individuals. It's like, what? Follow-up question to that. Strike speed of puff adders, do they strike faster than everybody else? I think that the most rapid of venomous group.
No, so they're not the fastest. I think there is one that's faster. Certainly in Africa, it's one of our fastest striking snakes. I will say that sometimes it can come across as quite a surprise when you're working with an animal and it just strikes so quickly. It really does surprise you. But again, that's why it's safety through distance. There's no need to get close to any snakes, for that matter of fact.
Yeah. I'm surprised. I wouldn't have even thought to ask that, because I would have assumed an elapid, just because they remind me so much of like a lot of the non-venomous snakes we have here, like coach whips and whip snakes that are so fast. I would have assumed that they would be the faster strikers, would not have thought that stout little puff adder would be a fast striker. So that's good to know. Should I ever get to visit their home?
So most adders, in fact, are a lot more faster striking than elapids. They tend to use their body and kind of the weight of their body to be able to kind of get that movement. And you can often see this where in their kind of defensive behavior. I'm sure you can see it with rattlesnakes too. They're really able to manipulate their bodies in a way that elapids actually don't.
Yeah, I have seen some pretty fast rattlesnake strikes. Is true. Same thing. They don't look like they would be able to do that. Nice. Well, Emily wants to know is that video, that really cute video that you showed at the end, is that available like on YouTube or something if we wanted to share that, or just watch it again? Cool. All right. I'll have to snag the link for that for sure later to put on there, because that is adorable.
Yeah, it's on the Save the Snakes YouTube channel. So yeah, you can access it from there.
Cool. All right. I see that we do have a hand up. Go for it, Jeff.
Hey, thank you so much for the work you do and the wonderful presentation. We kind of do this work in the US with some pretty obvious venomous versus non-venomous snakes. And we also use, and this is mostly Melissa, but we also use snakes that we bring to classrooms, non-venomous snakes, and kids get excited, and some of them want a pet snake of their own, but some of them, undoubtedly will go out and maybe try to pick up a snake. My impression is in Africa that there are loads of snakes of all different kinds. Maybe the non-venomous ones are not as easy to distinguish. So I imagine that when you're building excitement with young people and others, the public in general, there must be a delicate balance between getting people excited, but then also giving them enough information or trying to discourage them from picking up snakes that they may not be able to identify. So can you just speak a little bit about how you balance those things?
Yeah, sure. Misidentification about snakes is it's not just kids specific. Even some of the doctors that we work with, most of them don't know how to identify snakes, and in fact, most people really don't know how to differentiate the different snakes. And I think this is a global problem. And again, this is why I think it comes down to how we speak about the different snakes. So something we make a point to say is that, of the 176 snake species that we have in South Africa, there's only about 11% that are actually venomous. When we're kind of doing the presentations, we really try to get the kids to understand that, snakes have always been seen as negative. But if they start to just change the way that they're approaching, like physically approaching snakes, don't pick up any snakes that you don't know. Don't try to kill snakes. And so by that point, when we get to bring out a non-venomous snake, and again, there's a lot of people that, really don't want to touch the snake. We do it in quite an orderly fashion. So as opposed to some people, going into a classroom and taking out the snake and suddenly everybody's afraid. I think it is something that needs to be more of a relationship building skill. And that, comes from the educator, as well as the students and the teachers. And so it is, as you say, quite a delicate thing. And what we found is really important is that you have to speak to the kids in a way, or even the public, in a way that where you can actually build that trust with them. And that's really helpful. That's really helpful in trying to establish a relationship where they know that they can, if they've seen a snake, and they don't know what it is, they can call us. They can rely on us to be able to communicate the right kind of information to them.
Excellent. Thank you. So I have one more question in the chat, and then I think we'll start to wrap things up. So if anybody else has one they've been holding onto, go ahead and put it in there or raise your hand. Otherwise, I'll end it up after this. So one thing that I hear a lot when I'm out talking to people that, they don't like rattlesnakes, but one thing they do like about rattlesnakes is that they always warn you before they strike, which is a whole thing of that's not necessarily true. But the question from Sandra is, are there any African snakes that give warnings like rattlesnakes do?
So not when it comes to sound necessarily in the same way, but puff adders, like the name suggests, they actually puff. So the closer you get to them, they'll actually start to do this kind of hissing behavior, and they expand their bodies and retract their bodies. And you see them kind of huffing and puffing. And so this is, very different in different species. The black mamba, for example, has this, black coloring in its mouth. And when anything comes close to it and it perceives it as a threat, it will immediately gape. And you will see that black mouth. And well, if a predator sees that or a prey sees that, it will immediately be perceived as something dangerous.
Cool. So yeah, with that, a variety of adaptations as well. It's neat. It was, and there are, because I don't know if you have the chat on, but there's a lot of people that are just like, thank you. This was great. It was lovely. And I know for me, because we are here in the US, and so most of my connections of people to ask to join us here also work in the US. And I think with the exception of Harry Green, who did have some slides and stories from not the US, it's pretty much just been, the US snake show. So it was really cool to get to see some pictures and hear stories about species that I know almost nothing about. was super informative. And so there's some more thanks and kudos going on, but I think we'll go ahead and wrap things up. If we do get more questions for you that come up later via comments when we start putting this online, I will be sure to pass that along. Once again, thank especially our speaker today. That was a fascinating presentation, obviously, because of just so many questions. But that is about all the time we have today. Thanks to everyone for coming. Like I said, we'll continue monitoring the questions. So if you didn't get to do this during the live presentation, send your questions to us otherwise. And if we can't answer them, I will get them to Hiral and so she can get an answer to you. And thanks you for coming. Snakes still have a lot to teach us. So I hope you'll join us on the next episode of Snakes Are Everything. Take care. And thank you, everybody, for what you do for snakes every day. Bye-bye.